A billionaire walks into the White House. A routine meeting, or at least that's how it appeared. No cameras, no reporters, no official announcement. But within hours, the President of the United States publicly threatened to block a nearly completed international bridge worth billions of dollars. A bridge that has been under planning for more than 20 years. A bridge that is already almost finished. A bridge that both countries expected to quietly open next year. Now suddenly, it's the center of an international political confrontation. Officials on both sides of the border are scrambling to understand one central question. Did a private business dispute just turn into national policy? Because the timeline here is not just important, it's everything. Let's start with what happened Monday morning. Multiple confirmed reports state that Manuel Morone, patriarch of the family that owns the Ambassador Bridge, arrived at the White House for a private meeting. He met with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. No press briefing followed. No summary of discussion. No public explanation of purpose. Normally, such meetings happen quietly and stay quiet. This one did not. Because only hours later, the President posted a message targeting the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a 1.5-mile crossing between Detroit and Windsor, scheduled to open in early 2026. He wrote, quote, "I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them." That single sentence transformed a construction project into a geopolitical dispute. The reason the statement shocked officials is simple. Every factual claim behind it conflicts with the project's legal agreement. The President stated Canada owns both sides of the bridge. He claimed there was virtually no U.S. content. He demanded American ownership compensation. But according to the signed international agreement, none of those things are true. And when a major international threat is based on incorrect facts, there are only two possibilities. Either the decision was made using incorrect information, or the information was never the reason for the decision. To understand why this matters, we need to understand what the Gordie Howe Bridge actually is. This project did not begin recently. Planning discussions date back to the early 2000s. In 2012, Michigan's Republican Governor Rick Snyder negotiated the formal agreement directly with Canada. The terms were unusually clear. Canada would front the entire construction cost. Michigan would co-own the bridge. No U.S. federal funding. No Michigan taxpayer funding. Canada pays first. Then both sides share revenue later. This arrangement solved a decades-long political deadlock over who should pay for a second crossing. After years of negotiation, environmental review, and engineering design, construction began. Nearly a decade later, it is almost complete. For trade officials, this was supposed to be one of the biggest infrastructure improvements on the northern border in a generation. Until Monday. What makes the current threat even more striking is history. In 2017, during his first term, the President supported this exact same project. In a joint statement with Canada's leadership, he called it a, quote, "vital economic link between the United States and Canada." At the time, the project was praised as beneficial to both economies. Now, in 2026, the same bridge is being described as unfair to America. Same bridge, same agreement, completely different message. Let's go through the claims carefully. Claim 1, Canada owns both sides. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority confirmed the bridge is jointly owned by Canada and the state of Michigan. That is written directly into the legal agreement. Claim 2, no American involvement. American steel was used on the Michigan side. American workers were employed. The mayor of Windsor called the claim, quote, "just insane." Claim 3, America deserves compensation. But the United States did not fund the project. Canada invested more than $4.7 billion. Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters, Canada paid for the construction. Ownership is shared with Michigan. American steel and American workers were involved. He described it as, quote, "a great example of cooperation between our countries." So the factual record is not disputed, and yet the threat remains. To understand why this escalated, we need to talk about another bridge, the Ambassador Bridge. Built in 1929, it has been the only privately owned international crossing in the Detroit-Windsor corridor for nearly a century. One family controls it. Every day, over $300 million in trade crosses that single point. That means one private company sits at the center of a major portion of North American manufacturing logistics. For decades, there was no alternative crossing for trucks. The Gordie Howe Bridge changes that, and that changes everything. To understand why this situation matters so much, you have to understand the Detroit-Windsor border itself. This is not just another crossing. It is the single most important commercial land border in North America. Every single day, auto parts cross this border multiple times before a single car is completed. An engine block might start in Ontario, move to Michigan for machining, return to Canada for assembly, and then come back to the United States for installation. The manufacturing system works because the border works. Factories don't store months of inventory anymore. They rely on timing. That timing depends on trucks crossing quickly. If trucks slow down, production slows down. If production slows down, costs rise. And when costs rise, consumers eventually pay the difference. So when politicians argue about bridges, workers hear something else entirely. They hear uncertainty. Even the possibility of blocking the bridge has consequences. Companies make plans years in advance: shipping routes, warehouse placement, factory expansion. All of those decisions depend on predictable infrastructure. The Gordie Howe Bridge was supposed to reduce congestion and waiting times. Right now, trucks can wait hours during peak periods. Manufacturers calculated savings based on faster crossings. But when uncertainty appears, companies pause investment, not because the bridge is closed, because they no longer trust the timeline. Uncertainty alone can cost millions before a single policy is implemented. Privately, industry groups are already warning about the risk. Automakers don't like political unpredictability. Their factories operate on synchronized schedules measured in minutes, not days. If one supplier shipment is delayed, an entire assembly line stops. And stopping an assembly line is extremely expensive. Thousands of workers stand idle. Machines stop running. Orders fall behind. That is why reliable border infrastructure matters more than almost any trade speech. A tariff can be calculated. A delay cannot. For decades, experts warned that relying on a single primary commercial crossing was risky. One accident, one weather emergency, one security event, any of those could shut down trade across the region. The new bridge was not built for convenience. It was built for redundancy. Modern economies need backup systems. Airports have multiple runways. Servers have backup networks. Power grids have redundancy. The Gordie Howe Bridge was meant to be the redundancy for continental manufacturing. Blocking it would restore dependence on a single choke point. Now the situation moves beyond engineering and into politics. Michigan officials from both parties rarely agree on federal trade policy. But on this issue, many are aligned. Because this is not abstract geopolitics to them. This is local employment. Border communities understand something distant capitals sometimes forget. International trade is not only about countries, it is about towns. Truck drivers, customs officers, warehouse staff, factory technicians. The policy debate becomes personal when paychecks depend on crossing time. Some analysts believe the threat itself may be part of a negotiation strategy, not necessarily meant to be carried out, but meant to apply pressure. International negotiations often begin with maximal demands. The goal is to shift bargaining positions, but that strategy works differently with infrastructure, because a bridge cannot move. It cannot be relocated. It cannot be redesigned, and it cannot be easily delayed once nearly complete. So the leverage may be more symbolic than practical. Canada's response has been notably calm. no immediate counter threat, no emergency retaliation announcement. Instead, officials keep repeating the same point: construction continues. This kind of messaging is deliberate. Markets react to tone as much as action. Escalation creates volatility. Calm reduces it. By projecting confidence, Canada signals it does not expect the seen threat to materialize. Zoom out further, and the bridge dispute becomes part of a much larger relationship shift. For decades, the United States was overwhelmingly Canada's largest customer. That dependence shaped diplomacy. But diversification changes negotiation power. When one partner has alternatives, pressure tactics weaken. This is why infrastructure disputes can suddenly connect to unrelated trade topics, because they become symbols of a larger economic transition. Right now, businesses are not watching speeches. They are watching logistics indicators, shipping contracts, border staffing plans, opening schedules. Companies need to know one thing: will trucks cross faster next year or not? The answer affects investment decisions across multiple industries, not just automotive. Agriculture, retail, and energy supply chains also depend on this corridor. There are only a few realistic outcomes. The bridge opens on schedule. The opening is delayed administratively. Or legal challenges create temporary complications. But completely stopping a finished international infrastructure project would be unprecedented in modern North American trade relations. That is why many officials privately doubt the threat becomes permanent policy. At first glance, this looks like a political argument about a bridge. In reality, it reveals how modern economies function. Trade agreements may be negotiated in offices, but trade itself moves on roads. Infrastructure is policy in physical form. Once concrete is poured and cables are installed, political leverage decreases. And that is why this confrontation is unusual. It attempts to renegotiate after construction, not before. So the story is no longer just about a crossing. It is about the boundary between business influence and national decision-making, about whether infrastructure can become a bargaining chip after completion, and about how allies handle conflict in an integrated economy. The coming months will answer the remaining question, not whether the bridge exists, but whether politics can override physics. Because steel cables, poured concrete, and international contracts are already in place. And once traffic begins moving, the debate ends. Until then, uncertainty continues, not at the border itself, but in the political space around it.